Well, hello, NIRSA. I am Lori Klein, and I am the Director of Campus Recreation at the University of North Texas. I am thrilled to be here with you today to talk esports. I see a lot of familiar faces out there, and I know we've all been trying to navigate this world of esports for the last couple of years. So we're going to talk to you and answer as many questions as you might have. Let me introduce a couple people with me today. Garrett Larson is the coordinator of competitive sports at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Thank you, Garrett, for joining us. And then Wray is our esports coordinator at the University of North Texas. So we're going to take the lead on this and navigate it as you guys want us to. So let's start with probably the number one question that we get. You know, all of our campuses, our programs look very different. For some of us, it was mandated that we look into esports and figure it out and make it happen. That was kind of the direction that we were given at the University of North Texas. And here we are almost 3 years later with a program. And for a lot of you, either your story is very similar or you have had to spend a significant amount of time justifying either your passion or what your students are begging for, and trying to convince your administration that this is kind of where your department and program should head. So lots of different scenarios out there. And so, you know, everybody has approached it a little bit differently, and we'll kind of talk through those, the different models here in a little bit. The number one question that we receive as we talk to so many of you across the country, let me back up a little bit. Garrett and I have been serving on the NIRSA Esports Task Force for the last couple years. And so we've talked to a lot of you across the country about your programs, how to start them, where you're at, those kinds of things. And I think the number one question that we get asked from a NIRSA standpoint is, how does esports and campus recreation fit together? And there's a lot of debate out there, a lot of questions surrounding that. But what does that mean? How do they coexist? How does esports fit into the wellness model? How does it impact recruitment and retention? And of course, probably right now, everything that is affecting all of us, how has COVID-19 affected our view and around esports and programming? And I think probably for many of you, that has probably changed a little bit in the last 4 or 5 weeks. Maybe your administration is a little bit more on board with the idea now that we're all, you know, are working from home or whatever that looks like for you. So maybe this has made it easier. But I'm gonna go ahead and throw it to Garrett right now and let him just kind of talk about the feeling on his campus and how these two kind of coexist.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. And I think you touched upon probably the two most important points, given the the connection and the wellness aspect of esports, as well as its impact on recruitment retention. And realistically speaking, in bringing esports to UW-Eau Claire, those were the two predominant things that we looked at, where we used as quote unquote selling points for bringing it to our campus. I always go back to the survey we did as the task force, in talking about really the impact that esports can have. And realistically speaking, it does, it creates a social nexus where students that otherwise probably wouldn't be reached by traditional programming are able to be brought into the campus recreation arena, and be impacted by our programs and build those connections. One of my favorite things I always like to do is put some of the testimonials that are like on a whiteboard and take out the word esports and just read through them. And when, we had staff members that were talking about things across our member network of, building a culturally diverse community, creating a social nexus, engaging students to programs otherwise would not be involved. And when you look at those things and don't think about esports, everyone's always looking to jump on board. And then sometimes, obviously, when you throw esports kind of on the, in front of that, it gives them pause. But, as we continue to move forward, I think it's giving less and less people pause as they continue to see those, the benefits of it. And obviously with recruitment and retention, it's going to happen across the country, but especially obviously, you look at the Midwest where I'm at, we're going to see a huge decrease as far as enrollment goes. I mean, we're looking up to possibly 19%, in the next 5 years. And obviously with COVID, the COVID situation could be, a whole nother issue. But obviously in you can't think traditionally in non-traditional times, especially when we're looking at sustaining our, the student population in esports. Definitely was looked at and is seen as a huge advantage in maintaining enrollment. So, our club, the club started and we already have over 200 members. So definitely something that we're excited about as we continue to move forward. So.
Yeah, I think that is similar at the University of North Texas when this was a mandate from the president that we look into esports and really just figure it out and make it happen. We started looking internally to see what does that look like on our campus? Is there a gaming community? These were not students that we were typically serving. And so, I was in the same boat that many of you are probably in now, and thinking, absolutely not. This is not what we do. This is not what we're about. How do we do this, and why would we do this? Right. And at some point, my viewpoints have shifted significantly. Just from the mere fact of serving. For us, it was about 400 or 500 students in this gaming culture on campus that were not ever utilizing our programs or services or facilities. And so, we reached out and started meeting with them and kind of figuring out where they were at. And from there, we've got quite a community of kids who were already playing. And now we support them on various levels, whether it's through intramural tournaments or through the sport club or student orgs, or with Dylan, what Dylan's doing at the varsity level. So lots of layers on our campus from an esports perspective. So let me throw it out to the group right now. Any questions at this point or any comments about how does rec sports and esports exist? Okay, then hearing no questions, let's move on to probably why many of you are here, and that is COVID-19 programming. I am sure many of you have become as creative as we have become during this kind of unprecedented time on our campuses. We're used to serving people in person for the most part, bringing them to our facilities and our fields and whatever that looks like. And we've been forced to think outside the box. And so I'm going to send it over to Garrett right now so he can talk about some of the programming he's done on his campus as a direct reaction to COVID-19.
Yeah, and so UW-Clear, we're obviously a small institution, so I tried to keep it relatively simple and didn't want to introduce a whole new platform, although I think that's the right place they're going. So I kept it on IM leagues, and I know they had sent an announcement out kind of at the beginning of this as far as running ladder leagues, which I did across multiple games. Not surprisingly, at least, the most popular ones were not ones that you would think of as traditional sports, right? They were League of Legends, Rocket League, CSGO, games of that nature where you had the most team signups. But, was able to get team registrations through that and run, self-challenge ladder leagues through IM leagues, over kind of just like a 5-week regular season, quote unquote, building into a tournament. But I know that a lot of schools, and honestly, if this were to happen again, or if I'm to do this in the future, there's a lot of platforms out there that are specifically built towards this type of recreational esport tournaments and programming. Geeks, Battlefy, Tournament, Face It, Mission Control, just to name a few. I know are a lot of ones that can be utilized that I think are kind of represent, where the intramurals and tournament play is going. And they do offer viable options for, running anything from simple to complex tournaments and kind of have, are geared towards that community management engagement specific to gamers and those that are involved with esports. And obviously, going through Discord, I was lucky that we had an established Discord channel through our club, and was able to kind of capitalize on that just as the main communication point in advertising all this stuff. And I know a lot of people are even running their whole esport operations through Discord. So that's what we're doing here. But I know obviously there's a lot of options, just figuring out the one that's right for your institution, to implement that. So
Dylan, can you talk about what we're doing at UNT?
Yeah, so for intramurals, for the past couple of years, we've done esport intramurals, on our campus that kind of hit a wide variety of areas and game genres. So we definitely kind of continued the video game esport intramurals, but we've also expanded to do a few other things. So Billy Matthew and Cam Mellon have organized like these local area competitions from other kind of IM League champions, if you will, from other universities. And so they're doing that this semester, which I think is really cool. And so we're going to organize some kind of local area digital competition for things like Madden or 2K. So some of the kind of the rising stars in our intramural leagues get to, as a kind of a bonus, get to compete against some of the other local universities. So that's been really cool. And they've also been experimenting with games that we haven't really dabbled with before or had just come out recently. So we organized a Modern Warfare league this semester and experimented with that. And so we got a pretty good amount of numbers for that league. We've also been expanding our streaming community. So we've been doing kind of just opening the floor to anybody that loves to game or has anything that's kind of remotely related to gaming. We've allowed them to stream on our Twitch platform as sort of like a Tales from the Quarantine, just to really kind of provide connections to students in this very kind of disconnected time. And so that's kind of been something that we've been working hard with my team, and it's been kind of really cute to see all the different show ideas that people have come up with, from like playing like party games like Jackbox to doing like gaming speed runs and having people been able to kind of watch and experience those things. So it's much more of like a social community thing versus a competitive thing. And so it certainly kind of opened the doors for kind of programming in the future, but it's been kind of a neat opportunity for us.
So I'd like to open it up to you guys right now and talk about some of the specific program that you guys are handling, or doing right now on your campuses, specifically as a result of COVID-19. Anyone got some interesting ideas or interesting programs that you're running?
I'm Dan over at West Texas A&M University. We actually hopped on a mission control, and we're offering, we actually did Golden Tee, which is a mobile game, but it's free to use. And so I know that it's kind of hard to expect that all students or faculty staff have the right PC or the proper gaming console to get everyone on the same one. So we're trying to offer different experiences to reach as many people as possible. But we've had some good experience getting people onto mission control.
Thanks, Dan. Who else has some programming? I see a lot of comments right now about the advertising. The way I'm reading this in the chat is advertising to our students who aren't obviously on campus right now and trying to get them engaged, whether it be through intramurals or clubs. I think we're all struggling with that to some extent. Any ideas out there from a marketing standpoint? I see someone just posted they've got over 100 kids involved right now, and so I think in the intramural program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely recommend Discord as the main platform if you're trying to reach gamers specifically. It's a pseudo social media platform that's kind of forum based, so it's kind of like a mix of like Reddit and Skype if you put them together, and that's kind of the main social media platform that gamers typically use. And I'd say the biggest outreach and connection and engagement from our gaming population have come from Discord, and that's also the platform that we run our varsity program off of. So it is very catered towards gaming and tournament organizing.
A couple of the questions that are coming in, Garrett, I'm going to ask you this. Are you running any leagues on for Rocket League? Or is it just tournament type for Rocket League or some of the others?
Yeah, all the games that I'm offering right now are like league based, as far as using the challenge system over a 5-week period to allow participants to challenge each other. And basically I just said you have a minimum of 5 games minimum in order to qualify for the postseason tournament. So that's how for every game we're offering, including Rocket League. So
And we're doing a lot of that too. Just leaving it up to the students we'll put the schedules out there. They have a certain time frame to compete and report the winning teams to us, and then they go on to the next level. So a lot of self-reporting, and a lot of people here saying that they're working through IM leagues. Anybody else with some interesting COVID-19 programming ideas? I think this is a time where there are absolutely no wrong answers when it comes to esports and COVID. So and I think that probably some of you that are running your programs, some of your colleagues are probably reaching out to you and saying, how do I do this? How do I do this? Because, esports didn't have to change a whole lot because of COVID. Dylan just kept going. And the rest of us were struggling to figure out, okay, what does this new virtual world look like for fitness and for some of our other program areas? And Dylan just kept going and doing what he always does. So other ideas?
Here at HCC, we did think about doing an actual league instead of a tournament. So that way our students had, at least a month worth of playing Madden for a couple of weeks and maybe NBA. And then there was talk about doing a staff versus student league where,
That's cute.
you get the kids and the staff involved and hopefully kind of helps them communicate a little bit better during this time.
You thought about that. Have you done that yet, or you're just still in the process of thinking about it?
We're thinking if our program remains for the summer, that's something that we'll try because there's less students. So that way, like if we run into any problems, we can actually fix them quicker than, running a tournament or a league with 50 or 60 people and having all these issues. So that way, we can possibly try it again in the fall.
Right.
But right now we're just doing tournaments, no leagues just yet.
I see a comment here from Jake Wells. We're doing bingo, euchre, and family feud in addition to the Jackbox. So lots of, not your traditional esports games, obviously. Jake, you must be somewhere in the Midwest if you're playing euchre, I'm guessing. But yeah, so lots of great ideas. Other ideas for COVID from an esports or a gaming standpoint?
So one thing that I have talked with a couple other colleagues about is when we created the trivia show that we did with Rec Without Borders and having 1,000 people participate, 800 the second week, we just created a IM Leagues network for Rec Without Borders. And I wanted to get some thoughts on some people about doing some national competition. So it's just not specific to our schools, but not programming on top of each other, because I know a lot of schools are doing their own things. What are the kind of boundaries and kind of barriers to wanting to do a national competition, maybe breaking it down by NIRSA regions or regions of the country? Like, what is everybody's thoughts on doing stuff like that? So it's not specific to each school. There's a little bit of prestige playing against people from across the country.
So
Hey, Drew,
let me just initially approach that from a NIRSA standpoint. The role of the task force has been, and we partnered with NACE, the National Association of Campus Activities, or NACA, sorry, National Association of Campus Activities, to kind of determine what our members want from an esports standpoint. But NIRSA has not committed necessarily to, taking esports on fully under the umbrella of NIRSA, even though as members, we know what's happening in our campuses. And so they're still trying to navigate this world of esports. And that's kind of where we as a task force are helping guide those discussions. And so any type of national competition, we get that a lot from the task force as far as questioning. Any national competitions are those that are just kind of naturally happening, or game developers or leagues are putting on. So it would be interesting to hear from the group if you're doing anything from a state standpoint or region or nationally. Is there anything going on that you're aware of, or what's the interest out there?
Yeah, PERSA, Pennsylvania is doing a state-wide esports competition. I will put a link in the chat so people can take a look at what is going to be going on. I know Mars in Massachusetts is doing the same thing.
Okay. And Dylan, can you talk a little bit about what you did back in the fall with across the state of Texas?
The
Clash.
The Texas Clash.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we've organized some competitions on kind of like a Texas-wide level for universities that are in the area, and various schools have kind of like facilitated one-shot tournaments for us to compete against. So I know UTA put on an Overwatch competition where schools all across the state of Texas got to compete in. The year before that, we did one for League of Legends. So there's certainly something on the state level that the Texas universities are starting to kind of talk about and kind of organize as kind of things kind of start to move forward.
I'm reading here, Southern Miss is working with Ole Miss and Mississippi State for some cross-university programming. So yeah, lots of things going on in states. From a national standpoint, Drew, I don't know how to direct you on that. I think it's just something that has to happen from within our institutions, probably starting at the state level, maybe regionally, and then it growing from there. But at this point, NIRSA is not planning to do anything, at least in the near future, related to national competitions in esports. There's a lot more involved than just putting on, obviously, a big event.
Yeah, and also the specific games themselves are usually mandated, controlled by the developers anyways. So we'd have to like meet specific guidelines or get approval from them to be able to hold the tournament in the first place.
You know, one of the things that we've talked in this world of esports for a long time is, nobody owns the game of basketball or football. And so we've been able to put on those tournaments on our campuses, statewide, nationally, because everybody owns those particular activities. It's very, very different, obviously, with esports and the game developers for being so involved. And we'll get to game developers here in a little bit. I know that's a confusing part of esports and a hot topic. So any other last minute COVID-19 ideas for, programming? Okay, then let's move on. So one of the other questions that we get a lot is what does the program model look like? And there is no right or wrong answer to any of this. But we're going to talk about really from 4 different perspectives: the recreational or the intramural model, the sport club / student organization model, varsity model, and then a hybrid or a combination of any of those. I'm going to start with Garrett. Like he said, he is at a school of less than 10,000. And so Garrett, kind of talk about the model you guys are using and why and what that looks like.
Sure. So we had I guess our esport program truly started this year, and we had a League of Legends club that existed prior to my arrival back in July, which really served as kind of the foundation to build out the esport program. From there, we were able to get funding through Student Senate in order to purchase the equipment and built a facility over winter break to have that. But really utilize the club as kind of the starting point to show that the students were there. They obviously, as a club, are growing from that club. They have 5 different teams. We have a League of Legends, Overwatch, Rocket League, Super Smash, as well as a Rocket League team. So there's 5 different teams within the overall org. And we also came to an agreement with the club that they actually serve as the staff to supervise the lab that we have. And then we have open recreation hours in the lab. So from 12 to 3 and 6 to 10, Monday through Friday, and Sunday 6 to 10, we have open recreation hours for just a general student body to come in and use, as long as they have a valid ID. And then the club oversees that, and then they have their practice time in there from 6 to 10. And then we had started, obviously, running intramural tournaments, utilizing that lab space and the 10 computers that we have in there in order to do some tournaments prior to this kind of getting shut down. But also utilizing the club, to help kind of run some of those tournaments. And obviously the biggest thing I realized and kind of knew right away was that you need to have those students in place, that are there and willing to help get it off the ground, because it's tough to do and just on your own as a pro staff member. So.
Yeah, I would highlight that our students are key to making this a success. That so many of them are doing this, behind the scenes and underground already, and bringing them, into the forefront. Right. So Dylan was brought in literally for the University of North Texas as we were launching the program. You know, I had brought in one of my associate directors, and we didn't know esports. Britt and Sherry knew more than I did, but we didn't know esports, and so we knew very quickly that we needed someone like Dylan to take our program to the next level. We couldn't do that without him. So Dylan, kind of talk about where we were and kind of where we are right now in our program.
Sure thing. Yeah, so when Lori and Britton brought me on to bring UNT Esports into fruition as an official varsity competitive program for UNT, UNT had a very kind of vibrant club scene for a university that had 38,000 students at the time. I think now we're up to like 39,000. You know, we have a large community, and so the club scene had been going for a couple of years. And so the big thing that we did with the club is we empowered, you know, some of the officers that were really kind of the leadership in that team, and brought them on to help us kind of put together the first iteration of a competitive program. So by no means was this something that like one person achieved. This was a kind of a large team front to kind of put this together. And we wanted to obviously maintain that club and the competitive community. And so that club ended up actually staying with recreational sports as a sport club. So they actually brought under to the sport club department to obviously receive some support for the tournaments leagues that they wanted to still participate in, and remain autonomous as sort of like a kind of wide spectrum, catching all students and be able to provide service to those students. Because the program that I'm putting together for the varsity program really serves, less than 50 people all in all, as far as direct contact, because I have 24 athletes. I have, about 12 volunteers that are helping out with coaching. And I think I have about 16 or 17 people that are helping us out with broadcasting. So the direct opportunities for the program that I run doesn't quite reach everything, but having a sport club that is still student run has kind of allowed us to maintain a really large community and allow those students to kind of gain autonomy and be able to make decisions and enjoy their successes and stumble a little bit as you kind of expect from an opportunity from student engagement and student opportunity. So that's one big thing that we were able to kind of keep and preserve. Those students were able to utilize our public facility, the Nest, which was created just a little bit before I got in, and it's a fantastic facility for students to use during the daytime, and it's actually managed by our library system, which has been a fantastic collaboration. Because they're already kind of equipped to have a really good system of checking people in and checking people out of various tech gear and lab time, essentially. So they manage that space, and during the evenings is when my larger teams go in and use the facility for practices and competition. Then over the years, we're able to kind of grow and expand a little bit. We actually have a new facility that's in the recreation center that is specifically focused towards our varsity program for players to use, so they don't have to worry about reserving time for in between classes. They can just go to our facility called the Erie and just use it whenever they need it. And also, when we designed that secondary facility, we designed it with kind of public exposure in mind, because it was right down the track of when tours were coming through UNT, and they saw this facility and they're like, oh wow, that's so cool, I want to go here. And so like seeing that has been super cute. Seeing all the high schoolers and stuff see that. So but yeah, so I think we've kind of grown pretty significantly since elevating members from the club. We now have I think Lori had mentioned it was about a couple hundred. Now our Discord community is well over 1,000, and from like a recruitment perspective, I think we had over 700 students specifically look to apply to make it into our varsity program going into next year, now that we're providing scholarship opportunities for students to come and compete for the University of North Texas.
So here's an interesting question that I think some of you are probably, everybody's facing. So what are the strategies to handle issues with students entering tournaments not affiliated with the current student org or club? For example, a group of individual students entering in a Rainbow Six tournament, but not currently part of the esports club and listing themselves as the collegiate team. So Dylan, can you talk a little bit about that and the guidelines that some of the game developers are placing on these particular tournaments?
Most certainly. So a lot of the developers, so you know, whether it's Blizzard, Riot, Psyonix, they actually have a vested interest in maintaining interest in their games, and they actually view collegiate and high school competition as a driving force of maintaining the longevity of these esport titles. And so they have kind of a direct interventionalist approach to how these games are run on, you know, the high school level and the collegiate level. And so in collegiate, they'll have official clubs or recognizing official organizations on campus as the leader of that campus, right? So if we want to enter into a Blizzard tournament, we have to work with an organization called TESPA. So if we want to participate in Overwatch, Hearthstone, or Call of Duty, we have to officially work with TESPA in order to run that tournament. And it's been very beneficial in the sense that, you know, I think we've had a situation where, you know, we've had some students that registered in a League of Legends tournament, and Riot has specifically reached out to us and, you know, said, hey, are these your students? And we're able to say, like, no, those are not our students. You know, please register these students instead, because they're not officially a part of the registered organization to compete for the university. So I think a lot of organizations that do that have been really beneficial in kind of maintaining whatever status your university is. So if it has like an official club, you work specifically with that club, and only those members in that club are allowed to register for those tournaments. And if you have a varsity program, just coordinating with, you know, whether it's TESPA or Riot or Psyonix, you know, that we are the officially recognized varsity program. You know, these are our students that are competing.
One of the things that we haven't mentioned here today, but it's hard not to mention, is, you know, esports is really the wild, wild west. And so I think, you know, if you haven't realized that yet, it is. And so, you know, we're continually navigating these kinds of issues or concerns because there is no governing body over esports and the tournaments and the leagues that we're participating in. So let's move on to game choices. So I know that's a hot topic on many of our campuses. How do you choose the games? You know, and I think there's a lot of things that you have to consider. One, what are your students wanting? What are they already playing? What's the level of player that you have on your campus for a particular game? And then, you know, one of the things that we had to consider from an institution is the fantasy games. You know, I always felt perfectly fine with our students playing those, but what do the first person shooters look like? What are we encouraging? What are we supporting? And so back when we were making these decisions, I felt very strongly that Counter-Strike was not a game that we were going to take on, at least at that point, as we were launching our esports program. And we stuck with that, you know, till now. And I explained to the president and to the vice president that, you know, I'm not saying never, but you know, give us a chance to kind of wrap our heads around this esports, you know, craze, and let us kind of see where the industry goes. And so we play Rocket League, League of Legends, Overwatch, and Hearthstone. And we've stayed with those. We initially had Heroes of the Storm, but dropped that a year ago and added Rocket League. Again, dictated by the game developer, right, Dylan? Because they...
Yeah, you know, at the time that we added Heroes of the Storm, there was a show called Heroes of the Dorm, and it was the most like well-produced esport competition that was out there for the collegiate scene. So it made sense for us to have a team for it. But you know, when the developer decided to stop officially supporting, you know, the competitive scene for it, you know, we decided to, you know, make an adjustment and move. And and it worked, you know, really well for us with, you know, with adding Rocket League. Which is heavily supported by Psyonix, and it's only growing right now. But I think, all of this is so new, there's no real reason to like stick to your laurels and, stick with a game that's not actually servicing your community.
And one of the things that we've done, and Garrett, I'm not sure where you guys are at, but we've committed to 4 teams through the varsity program as of right now. But we are dabbling in some of the other games through intramurals. We had a Counter-Strike tournament. We've done Call of Duty. We do that, on a regular basis. So Garrett, what is your feeling on campus as far as game selections?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. So I think a lot of times, obviously, it just goes back to the mission of your, department and your institution, and does offering a first-person shooter game fit within that mission and what you're trying to do? I think a lot of times it doesn't, but for some, obviously, it does, depending on, the outlook of your esport offerings. We came out just because I think it's very hard sell when you're establishing esport program to look at those games. So we came out and just had a hard no on anything that was M for mature or above. I went back to, myself and the club were interviewed by our local news station as far as the program. And I think the last thing we wanted was to have the image of, one of those first person shooter games playing behind us. But with that being said, back in, this would have been February, our student senate actually approved, I don't know if you want to call it an amendment or, bill or whatever, but they approved for recreation to offer M for mature games, actually, because there was demand to play both CSGO and Rainbow Six. So I'm not saying that every institution is going to have their student senate approve the play of M for mature games, but if we do decide to offer it, and kind of offering CSGO as an intramural league during this time was kind of just to dip our toe in the water for it. But if we do decide to go that route, at least, we do have the backing of the student senate, given that they passed that. So we'll see where it goes, but it was interesting. So
for us, it was, we knew what the expectations were of the president and where he wanted our program to go and be on the forefront, at least in the state at the time that we were launching a couple of years ago. And so at that point, the games were kind of, dictated for us from the standpoint of what competition was out there and what other schools were playing at the varsity level. Varsity is questionable and debated all the time, but so we knew Overwatch, League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm were games that we needed to play in order to be competitive at that time. So any other questions or discussions out there regarding game choices, game selections? I'm seeing here on the chat, a couple schools playing CSGO. And so I would say that's a bit of a shift than what we were seeing a couple of years ago when we were launching our program.
Yeah, it makes sense. First-person shooters, while they might not make sense for like a university branding image, are one of the driving forces of the esports industry.
Yeah.
Like CSGO has been one of the number one esport titles for over 10 years. So it's hard to ignore, but it just really depends on what you want for your university image and what's kind of best for your organization.
A lot of comments here also about, whether we like it or not, these are the games our students are playing. And so to remain competitive or to allow them to be a part of the esports program or community, it's the games that they're playing. So, at some point they do dictate what they are playing, what they want on our campuses.
For sure. And,
so
and
let's,
like
yep.
an intramural level and a club level, that certainly makes sense. I think when you get to like a varsity program, for a game choice to make sense for us, when we win a tournament, we want our central PR team to want to take that game and everything that's about that game and be like, hey, look at these students that accomplished these things, because that's what is important to our programming as far as an official competitive branch for the university. We don't want them to be like, oh, we'll celebrate the success of Rocket League, but maybe not this Counter-Strike game. So as long as everyone from like top level down is on board, that's when it makes sense for a varsity program to pick up a game like that. And so that's obviously something that we took into consideration when we selected our titles, and that's why like Overwatch was a much easier sell to administration, to be like, all right, there's this monkey in a spacesuit that's shooting this gigantic hamster, not the same kind of violence you'd see in like CS:GO or Rainbow Six Siege.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit to talk about facility requirements, equipment, peripherals, and everything, desks and chairs, everything that goes along with that. What you're not going to hear from us is any right or wrong way to do this. All of us know that space on a college campus is, coveted for a number of different reasons. When this was first brought to me and I was talking about, we would have to figure out what the space looked like. The initial reaction by the administration was, we'll figure out what kind of space you could provide in the rec center. And I kind of reacted, was like, absolutely not. There's no space in the rec center. So that was where the collaboration between the libraries and us was so incredibly invaluable to us being able to launch our programs. It was where the gaming community already was on our campus. And they agreed to renovate the space if we would agree to equip it. And so what I don't know is what they spent on renovations, but I know our vice president supported the equipment at that point at about $250,000 just to launch that initial practice space, as well as it is also open to the students. So, I think there's a couple things to consider, whether your space is going to be for private practice or whether it's going to be general open use space to the student body. Kind of like a public gaming center, or an arena for live events. We are lucky enough on our campus to have the very small private space for our for a team, let's say of 6, in the rec center. It was an old pro shop that we converted, but it is not open to the students, just open to our players. And then we've got the nest that Dylan talked about, which is in one of the libraries, and that is a larger gaming space for our teams, as well as open to the students. And then we have the fortunate capability of using a space in the Union for live events called the Lyceum, and it seats about 500. Fantastic, technologically, situated facility, and we've been incredibly blessed to be able to host some live events and provide our launch event in that space. So we're very lucky. Dylan, you want to add anything from a space standpoint?
As far as like what you need for space, I
Yeah.
think, it really just depends on what you're, trying to accomplish and kind of put together. If you're trying to design a space that's, open to the public, have something that is kind of open, that's easily found, so that, anyone that's kind of like coming into, the campus can be like, oh, I know where this gaming center is. I think, one challenge that we kind of we have is that like our gaming center is now like in a basement, and so it's something that if we were to design again, I know like for instance like UTD's is like right in the student center with a giant glass window that you can kind of see when you walk through, and you're like, oh, that's where the public gaming center is, and so they're able to kind of really kind of generate a huge community there, and that's something that I really liked, that I saw a different university do and kind of put together. If you're doing competition, you want to make sure that, or you want to design a space that's going to have like competition in your space, have a way to kind of like silo off people, because these games are team-based. So I'm going to be talking to my teammates about what I'm going to do, what I might do in about 30 seconds, what's the game plan, what's our strategy, and having an environment where the other team can overhear what the other team is doing is not something that you want. So maybe like I know some spaces have like essentially like battle pods. So with our space, we have 2 areas in which there's computers set up so that when we're doing like tryouts or something like that, we have a place where they can compete on one side of the door, and then another team can compete on the other side of the door. Another thing, if you're doing, official competitive space or competitive teams, is a space where, all of your players can watch replays of matches. Because very similar to like college football, where you might watch the competition that you're going to compete that weekend, or watch a replay from a match that you had done previously, you want a space where people can download and watch the matches that they've competed in, because that really allows those players to realize some things that they might not be doing so well, and be able to fix some strategies for future time. So in the media library where we have our Nest facility, there's a whole separate room with a projector where we're able to sit down and have meetings and watch our team's previous matches, or what our opponents might be doing in the next match.
Garrett, anything to add there from a facility standpoint?
Well, there was one person that had asked previously, a couple, as far as like just the base level equipment that you need, because we really were very baseline as far as just get the necessities and go from there. We had a partnership with Dell. I guess by partnership, I mean contractually obligated to purchase through Dell for our equipment. But we actually purchased, they're literally called Jumpstart packages through them. So the Jumpstart package, like is the gaming station or like the hard drive, monitor, mouse, keyboard, headset, and chairs. And then we also purchased tables, and that was 10 of those total, being that 10 is usually the minimum you need to play League of Legends and some other team-based popular esport titles. From there, as far as just a facility goes, I know a lot of times facilities are being built for 200,000 plus, and that's pretty tough for a lot of institutions to do or stomach, which I understand. Ours is relatively small. We did ours for, I think I can mention it was around 45,000, and 20 of that was through Student Senate funding the discounted equipment that we got through our partnership. So there is creative ways to go about it and do it just to get the foundational aspects of it off the ground. Obviously going into now a possible financial crisis, I think a lot of us are not going to be able to, to do that in the near future, but something to think
I think
about.
that's a good point as we enter into this, whatever after COVID-19 looks like for our campuses. I don't know if you guys are struggling, but we are definitely being asked to cut budgets and what that might look like as we're unsure about enrollment, projections for summer and fall. And so, what does that look like from a esports facility standpoint? I've talked to a number of schools across the country, that don't have the ability to, build, even renovate, existing spaces on campus. There was one school out in, I want to say Rhode Island, who was literally creating kind of a lounge type space in the rec center and asking their student clubs to bring their gaming computers. And so they were creating more of an experience and a culture than providing the space, but not providing the equipment. And it was changing, impacting those students for sure, just to be able to have that space to meet and gather and, do something that they all love to do. And so I think that, it runs the gamut on everything that we're seeing. Of course, the UC Irvines have a spectacular, multi-million-dollar facility where they do arena or tournaments in. But most of us aren't like that. There's a lot of schools that have done some fantastic grassroots type fundraising, and they're getting there. But when we got into this world of esports, there was a lot of talk about lots of money out there from either the developers or the sponsors or computer companies, and we have found that that's just not the case. There's a couple things out there that we've been able to get our hands on, but the money isn't out there like we were at least led to believe. So anybody out there creatively, have you done anything creatively with space to support these students? Couple of the questions, any suggestions for noise canceling? We have a really tight space, very without much flexibility. So Dylan or Garrett, you want to answer that from a tournament type live event standpoint?
I could definitely say, like, the headset that I'm using right now is a dynamic microphone, and that we actually use for our shoutcasters typically. So it's very much designed to allow people to be like really loud or talk however much they want, but it's only really picking up at a small contained area. So that's something that really helps out, is like the audio gear that you pick up on your microphones. Also, Discord now has a really good noise reduction tool in it that's kind of in beta that just got put out, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that has been absolutely terrific. But yeah, I mean, like, when you have a whole bunch of gamers that are screaming, like with 20 PC stations, it can certainly get a little loud. So picking up, like, if you take a note from like streamers, you could potentially get some noise reduction baffles. They're essentially like egg carton foam pads, kind of like when you go camping. So some of those actually like really help reduce like reflections of sound. So that also helps But yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do to like treat a room to reduce the overall loudness. But it is certainly something if your facility is kind of like designed to have a whole bunch of people in one area, and especially with depending on what game you're playing, some gamers are a little louder than others, especially like Overwatch players. For some reason, they're our loudest group for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about leagues and tournaments, and then of course, one of the big questions that we all are faced with competitive programs is how to handle scholarships and winning. And so at UNT, we have, starting this past year, FY20, we started allocating scholarships. We allocated about $20,000 this year from student service fees to our players. And we work directly with the scholarship and financial aid office. We are not, we're not athletics, of course, and so we don't have the infrastructure set up within the rec sports department to really handle scholarship and the details that surround that from the standpoint of, financial aid and the needs of our students. So we didn't want to get into that at all. And so we work directly with the scholarship office. We allocate through the student accounts. And right now we're doing a fairly even scholarship allocation of the $20,000. That could change, at any point, but it was even across the board this year. And then the same with winnings. When our teams, we do let them enter tournaments with prize pools, of course. And so when any of the teams win money, those funds are sent to the office, the department, and then we then allocate those funds through the student accounts as well. And so when it's winnings, they go specifically to the players that played and won those amounts. The allocated scholarships are of course across the board. So Dylan, talk a little bit about leagues and tournaments and that side of esports.
Sure. Yeah. So there's like a myriad of different tournaments and organizations that are out there for people to compete in, from like either the club level or like on an official varsity level. It really kind of comes down to what games you select and who's kind of really running the show in that particular environment. There are a few like officially recognized hubs from developers, because I think Lori had mentioned, these developers obviously own the concept of these games. And so a couple of big ones that I definitely threw out there is TESPA. TESPA is the official competitive branch for all Blizzard titles. I can probably drop a link here in the chat here in a little bit as far as where to find TESPA and how to set up your own TESPA chapter. But once you have that set up, you're allowed to officially compete in basically what is considered the official Overwatch tournament for the collegiate scene, the official Hearthstone tournament for the collegiate scene, the official Call of Duty tournament for the collegiate scene for all Blizzard titles. For League of Legends, Riot essentially has kind of an iron grip on the official League of Legends tournaments that are out there. And I think the big thing is, obviously there's a lot of tournaments that are out there, but anything that offers a large prize pool comes from Riot or is authorized by Riot and some of these other tournament organizers. For Rocket League, Psyonix runs everything through CRL, or Collegiate Rocket League, and also an organization called CCA, or College Carball Association. And those are some pretty big organizations. I know Ubisoft is starting to develop their collegiate scene for Rainbow Six Siege. And so I think you'd have to go through specifically Ubisoft to get registered as a Rainbow Six Siege club, essentially, or whatever status you are, whether you're a club or a varsity program. That's how you eventually get registered to do so. Now, the beauty of all of these ones, and why I really like to highlight them for collegiate programs, is that they're free. It doesn't cost you any money to set up a chapter program with TESPA, because they believe it doesn't matter whether you're a club that has like 5 members, or you're a varsity program that has scholarships, or whatever. You have the same chance to participate in intercollegiate competition. Because right now there's no real organization or differential between a D3 school and a D1 school. Right now, there's no real need for it. So just basically anyone that can sign up can officially compete and play. I think the one thing that we're starting to see from those organizers is that they're starting to differentiate varsity versus club. So there are some specific tournaments that are catered towards varsity programs, but those all usually still funnel into kind of the same national championships. It's just how you qualify.
Thanks, Dylan. So I know we've only got about 5 minutes left, and I want to be very, very cognizant of everybody's time. I do want to kind of give you an update on what you can expect from the task force over the next month or so. Like I said, we have partnered with NACA, and we are in the process of wrapping up our work for the year. Look for, we do have on Connect, we have an esports community on Connect, so look for that. We'll be posting some things there and to get out to you. We've got a national list of esports experts that'll come out to give you guys a resource of who to call, what their programs might look like. So, if you're wanting to talk to somebody that's from a larger public institution, you could call us, or, someone who's running intramural and club level tournaments or programs, call Garrett. So a lot of people, there's probably about 15 or so names on that list that'll be published here in a bit. Some gaming terminology. So really for the novice who's just entering this world of esports, all I'll say is good luck. But we're going to provide you with a kind of a list of terminology to help you kind of navigate and understand the language. A list of leagues and game developers that our competition group has been working on, a top 10 list, things you need to know to kind of start a program. And then we're hoping that we'll continue to offer more of these and some programs, presentations, of course, at our regional conferences, whatever those might look like as we move into the fall. So any last minute questions or anything that we can answer before we head out?
Just one thing, because we're just starting, so we're one of those novices, but we're taking a different approach. Our provost got excited about it, and so we're partnering with our business school because there's a whole lot more to esports than just playing. You can develop them. So our business school got really excited, and our IT people got really excited. So kind of partnering and not just looking at the actual game, but what kind of opportunities are there for students to kind of grow in this world outside of just playing. My bigger concern, which is why we haven't done it, probably that was our holdback, I'm at William and Mary, was the whole wellness aspect of it. I was really worried about, it can be unhealthy if it's not done correctly. So this group has also incorporated our vice president for health and wellness to have conversations about how you can do this healthy. And I think that's, for me and NIRSA, for the NIRSA aspect of it, I think that's the biggest part. Now at the varsity level, that may be a little different, but for the recreational users, I think it's important to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I think, we could easily do a part, probably 2, 3, 4, 5 of esports and still have topics, that we can address. What we haven't talked about is the whole idea of streaming, generating revenue that way. And then there's a lot of us that are working with our campuses and academic departments to build and develop those academic programs. And so we're in the process, UNT is doing that. And we've got a small part in that development. So more to come, I think, on this. If not, feel free to reach out to Garrett, Dylan, or myself, and we'll be happy to, kind of answer the questions that you might have or get you in touch with people that we think can definitely help you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.